All right, welcome people once again to another episode of the Python programming tutorial. This is My name is Eliazar and you are watching EA Lego Academy. So now to continue from where we left off, we want to see how we can use conditional statements with lists. So the first definition we have here is using if statements with list. So I will proceed. So we said this is when we use an if statement to create conditions for elements in a list. So now the first thing we want to look at, the next definition is checking for special checking for special items. So now this is when we look through a list and create conditions for each element in the list so we can execute a program. All right, so now you can see that here I would explain it with the code here first, then we're going to go over to our Python to write our own code from scratch, but I will explain it here first of all, then we would write our code. All right, so now you can see that I created a list here that has 6 elements in it. So the list is called if list. Now we all know how for loops work normally. So a for loop runs based on the number of elements contained within a data structure. So we know that a for loop would run based on the number of elements within a data structure. And we know that for each execution of a program within a for loop, we refer to each execution as an iteration. So now, from what we are seeing here, we can see that for the first iteration, that this variable we created here, IFI, represents Adam for the first iteration. Now, within the for loop, we have a conditional statement that allows us to check if the element at that iteration is equal to the element at the zero index. Now we can see that for the first iteration, IFI is Adam, and Adam is equal to the element at the zero index. So this is just like checking if Adam is the same thing as Adam. They are equal. So this condition is true. So this will print out this sentence, hello there, to the element for that iteration, Adam. So it will print out hello there, Adam. Then the for loop will start a second time. Now, before the for loop starts a second time, I want to explain this. You can see that here the else statement would get executed if this condition is false. So the if condition for the first iteration was true because for the first iteration, IFI was Adam. So since IFI was Adam, it will print out hello there, Adam, and then the for loop will start its next iteration. Now, when the for loop starts its next iteration, IFI is now Thomas. Now you can see that this condition is still checking if the element for that iteration is the same as the element at the zero index. But you can see that for the second iteration, IFI is Thomas, and Thomas is at the 1 index, not 0 index. So this condition is false automatically. So for the second iteration, the condition would be false. So we can see that here, IFI is Thomas for the second iteration. So this condition is false. And we were told that if we have an else statement, where we have an if conditional statement, and if that if conditional statement is false, the else statement would get executed. So if I should run this code, you will discover that for the first iteration, we are going to have hello there, Adam. Then for the other iterations, for the other 5 iterations, we're going to have greetings, Thomas, greetings, Anthony, greetings, Mark, greetings, Alan, greetings, Senat. That's just an overview of what is happening. So you can see that here we have combined the use of a for loop, a conditional statement, and a list data structure. So let's write one ourselves from scratch. So here I can come here and create a list called courses, for example, and write down a few courses here: physics, biology, chemistry, Now I'll create a for loop. I'll say for course in courses. I'll now create a conditional statement if course is equivalent to courses at the zero index. So what I'm saying is that for the first iteration, I want to print out a sentence. Hey there. So now this will print out a sentence for the element at that iteration. You can come here and create an elif if you want for the next element, for as many elements as you want. Courses at the one index using an f string, and you can decide to do for as many as you want. So what I will just do, I'll just use the else so that we will not waste time. Now you will discover from what we have here that for the first iteration, when course is physics, it will print out hey there physics. So it doesn't make sense. So I'll just say you study physics. The next one is you are offering, so that the sentence can make sense. So that's why I'm trying to correct everything to make a proper sentence. It doesn't really matter, but so your course. All right. So now you will discover that when this for loop runs the first time, course is physics. So it means that this condition is true. And we were told that when the if conditional statement is true and we have other conditions, the very first one that was true, that is what Python would execute. So it is the very first condition that Python saw to be true. That would be the condition that will be executed. All right. Now, when the for loop starts a second time, course is biology. Now, when it starts a second time, since course is biology, this first if conditional statement is not true. It becomes false for the second iteration. It is the second conditional statement, which is the elif, that would be true for the second iteration. So to print this out, you are offering biology, and you will discover that when it runs the third and fourth time, we are going to have the same sentence printed out for chemistry and mathematics. So if you run your code, you're going to have that. So you can compare and contrast. So you can see that the if condition printed out, you study physics. For the second iteration, we had you are offering biology, and for the last two, we had the same sentence under the else. So we can see that for the third and fourth iteration, the if and elif conditional statements became false. So, and we were told that the moment the if condition is false and the elif condition is false, and we have an else statement, that else statement would be executed. So these are the things that we need to know. So now the next thing we want to look at is checking that a list is not empty. So we said this is when we confirm that a list has elements first before we loop through that list. So this is demonstrated in the program below. Okay. So before I proceed, I want to explain something to you first. So you comment this out. Now, in Python programming, if I create a variable and I assign it a value, maybe James. Now, in programming terms, this value is seen as a true value. If I create another variable, I assign it a string value, but without writing any character within the quotation mark, Python sees it as a false value. And if I create a list that has some elements, Python sees it also as a true value. If I create another list and I assign it an empty, rather, if I create another variable and assign it an empty list as a value, Python sees it as a false value. So these are the terms we need to know. If you assign a string value to a variable and that string value has characters like letters or special characters, Python sees it as a true value. And if I create a variable and assign it an empty string, Python sees it as a false value. If I create a variable and I assign it elements, whether they are string values or numerical values, Python sees it as a true value. And if I create an empty list or I create a variable and assign it an empty list, Python sees it as a false value. All right, so let's proceed. So I created a list which was empty. I'm now checking if empty list. So from what I've just said, an empty list is seen as a false value. This is the same thing as if false. And we were told that if a condition is false, the if conditional statement would not get executed. So the code here will not get executed. But because we have an else statement here, this else statement would execute this program. So now the program within the else statement is a list that has 4 elements, and we are trying to loop through that list. And as we are looping through the list, for each iteration, the elements in that list, we want to add them to the empty list so that later we can loop through the list, which was empty before, but would now have elements after we are done looping through it and appending each element to the list that was previously empty. So in the else statement, we created a list. We are going to loop through that list, and as we are looping through it, each element for each iteration, we want to be adding them to the empty list using the append function. Then after that, after we are done adding each element, we are now going to loop through that list that was previously empty but now has elements. So that's what is happening here. But we'll write ours ourselves. What I'll do, I'll come here, create a list, I'll call it data set, initially empty. I'll come here and I'll say if data set. So um, what will I do here? I can just create a tuple, just call it constant. Since we know that we cannot change elements in a tuple, I'll just use them as constants. You can come here and what's the word? Just look through it. So for con in constant, you want to print con. So this will happen if this condition was true, this would happen. But from what I said, an empty list is seen as a false value, so this would never happen. So you can create an else statement that allows you to, I'll just say append directly instead of listing type. So append, I'll just now before you say append, you can just come here and create a list. So I'll just do it the old school way. I'll call the list contain. So append contain at the 0 index. The next one, data set dot append contain at the 1 index. So this thing I'm doing is targeting the elements at their respective index. We have treated this before when we looked at introduction to lists. So if you can't remember, just go and watch my video on introduction to lists and you would understand what I'm doing here. So I'm targeting each element at their specified index and I'm adding them to the list that was previously empty. Data set append, then saying at the 2 index. After that, here and for data in Okay, so what's happening here is that I now the list was empty initially, so this condition, this code would not get executed. So Python immediately comes here and adds this element from this list to the empty list. And after that, we decided to now look through the list which was empty before, and you will discover that it will print out James, David, and Greg. Yeah. So basically, that's what we mean by checking that a list is not empty. So checking that list is not empty. So you can comment it out since we are done. Right, the next one are looking at here is using multiple lists. So we said this is when we write a program using multiple lists combined with a for loop and conditional statement. So this is when we combine the use of multiple lists and conditional statements together. So we're just bridging terms that we have learned to write new programs. So the whole purpose of you learning how to write code as a programmer, or the various terms learned in programming, from data structures to conditionals to loops, is for you to be able to create a program that solves a real life situation. So we will be looking at that later on as we get familiar with code and algorithms. So here we are combining what we learned when we talked about Boolean values earlier on in this tutorial series. For this particular series, when we talked about Boolean values, truth tables, conditional statements, and if you can remember, if I should write print here, if I should write print, sorry, if I should write print here, you will discover that this will print out true. Because why? For the first iteration, because all right, I'm looping through this list and I'm trying to check if the element for that iteration as I looked through this list is inside this second list here. So we can see that here count for the first iteration in the first list, country one is Nigeria. So it's going to check if Nigeria is inside this list called country two. So if Nigeria is there, it will print out. It will now if Nigeria is there, it means that this condition would return true. So it's going to print out found it. But if Nigeria is not there, it will come down here and execute the code in this else statement, which is didn't find it. So it will start the for loop a second time and repeat the same process over and over again. So for the second iteration, count would now be France. To now check if France is inside country 2. So France is there, so it will print out found it. But if France was not here, to print out didn't find it. So by the time we are done with this, with running this for loop, you will discover that for the first two iterations in country 1, we are going to have found it, and for the last three iterations, we're going to have didn't find it. So we're going to write as ourselves. So you will discover here that if I decided to write print, that is print count, like this in parentheses, for the first iteration, you will discover that it will print out true. Then for the other iterations, print out, sorry, for the first two iterations, we're going to have true, and for the last three iterations, we're going to have false, because this count for the last three iterations is not inside country 2. This is something we have done already when we started this conditional statement series. So I'm just trying to refresh your memory as to the reason as to how it works or why it works the way it works. Okay, I hope I'm making sense. If I'm not making any sense, in the comment section, let me know where you are finding it difficult, and I would do my best to reach out to you as well. I'm trying to build a healthy community whereby we build relationships together. You guys comment about my video if it was not informative or if it was informative to you. Whichever way, I would do my best to respond. Yeah. All right. So that's what we're trying to do here. So I can create a list. I can call it and write Harvard, Oxford, um, Yale, Stanford. Now, can come here and create a follow. So before that, I can say school one, so school one, and then I can create another school and call it school two, and this one will have just Oxford, and then to have Stanford. Now I can come and look through school one, so SC1 in school one. So I will now come here and say if SC1 in school two, print out here it is. But if it is not there, print out not here. So now you will discover that for the second iteration and for the last iteration, we're going to have here it is. But for the first and the third iteration, we're going to have not here. So if you run your code, you discover that the, the second and last will have here it is, and the other two we have not here. You can see that the second and the last have here it is, and the first and third have not here. So that's how we can work with lists. There are so many other ways we can carry this out and all that. So that brings us to the end of another tutorial series. I just wanted to finish up the part one and part two for the conditional statements. This particular tutorial series um, was 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 joined together with the previous tutorial series I did. It was joined together, but because the video would have been very long, it would have been longer than usual, I had to break it down into three parts so that, of course, you guys would not get bored. So I will be sending the assignment. I would send it, I'll create a video for that, and I would upload the assignment for you guys. Now, if you found this video informative, if it was beneficial to you, please like the video. I really need your likes. So like the video if it was informative to you. And if you are not a subscriber yet, please hit that subscribe button. And if you feel it might benefit someone else, your friends, your families, please do well to share it with them. So till next time, have a very great day.